Hi, I'm Kate. My sister once said I was just a blur, the kind no one remembers, the kind people crop out of photos. Then she sent her boyfriend to remind me of my place. He didn't slap me. He shattered my face against a locker. And when I came home bleeding, my parents told me not to ruin her senior year. But I didn't disappear. I learned how to focus. And the next time they saw me, they couldn't look away. Before we begin, what time are you listening and where from? Drop a comment below. This story? It's not about revenge. It's about what happens when the blur comes into focus. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace. It comes from being erased, day by day, name by name, photo by photo. That was my life at Columbia Falls High School. Most people didn't notice me. I wasn't bullied exactly. I wasn't adored either. I was convenient silence. Teachers called me quiet but capable. The counselor once told me, "Kate, you're like the still water of this school." What they didn't realize was how often still waters drown things. I walked the halls like a ghost people got used to. I carried my camera everywhere, not because I wanted to capture memories, but because I felt safer looking at life through glass. I was always behind it, never in front. Then there was Callista. She wasn't just popular, she was curated. Everyone in her orbit seemed lit just a little better, sounded just a little smarter, laughed just a little louder. It wasn't that she hated me. No. Callista ignored me like someone who'd already decided my worth, and everyone else followed her lead. That morning, walking down the south wing, I saw her before she saw me, strutting with her usual cloud of admirers. Their voices filled the corridor, high-pitched, bouncing off the lockers like a track on repeat. "She's the one who got the state math award and homecoming queen," I heard a freshman whisper. Of course, that's Callista Brown. She runs this place. Not one glance toward me, not a flicker of recognition. Later that afternoon, we were called into the gymnasium for the academic recognition assembly. I sat halfway back, close enough to hear but far enough to disappear. They read out names, clapped politely. Then came the principal's voice. "We also want to thank Callista Brown for her contributions to the debate team, student council, and community service." She stood up like she was born on cue, took the mic, smiled too wide, and then she said it. "Oh, and to my sister Kate, thanks for always being supportive, and for photobombing half my high school career. She's the blur in every background shot." Laughter, not just from the kids, from the adults, from the teachers. I didn't move. My legs went ice cold. My hands curled around the strap of my camera bag. The laugh didn't die quickly. It stretched, awkwardly, like everyone was waiting for a punchline that had already landed. I wasn't in the room anymore. I was 8 again, hiding behind the Christmas tree because Callista told me my dress made me look cheap. But this time, I didn't run. I didn't cry. I just watched her walk off stage, high-fiving a friend, not even looking my way. That night at dinner, I thought maybe someone would bring it up. Not to apologize, just to acknowledge it happened. We sat at the kitchen table. My mom reheated pasta. My dad scrolled through his phone between bites. Callista waltzed in late, glowing from her own applause. "So proud of you, sweetie," Mom said, touching her wrist. "You were funny today." "Wasn't she, though?" Dad added, grinning. "You've got charm. That joke about your sister, classic." I blinked. "Classic," he repeated, chuckling. "You had the room." "I didn't think it was funny," I said quietly. Callista rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Kate. Don't be dramatic." "It embarrassed me." My mother sighed. "Honey, it was just a joke. You're too sensitive sometimes." I opened my mouth, closed it. The words clawed at my throat, but I knew they'd get nowhere. I took my plate to the sink, washed it, dried it, said nothing. No one stopped me. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The light from the hallway seeped under my door like a lie. I remembered a birthday party years ago, when I turned 11. They wrapped an old necklace Callista didn't want anymore and called it a family heirloom. I smiled and said thank you like I meant it. That was the same year I learned how to disappear politely. I'd thought that being quiet made things easier, that it held the family together somehow, but maybe it didn't hold anything. Maybe it just made me easier to ignore. The next morning, I got to volleyball practice early. Too early. The locker room was still echoing with the hum of fluorescent lights. I liked the quiet. Until I didn't. Because then, I heard footsteps. And they didn't belong to any girl on the team. They were heavy, confident, deep voices. Too casual for this space. I stopped mid-step. My fingers gripped the strap of my bag again, my back pressed to the cold metal locker behind me. I couldn't breathe. The footsteps weren't just getting closer, they were deliberate, confident, too loud to be any girl from the volleyball team. I stayed still, breath caught halfway in my throat, hoping they'd turn around, that maybe this was some fluke and they'd walk into the wrong locker room and laugh it off before leaving. But then I heard the clatter of something metal. Someone had kicked a bench. The door creaked shut again behind them. And I knew. I knew before I saw them. Mason Jex's voice cut through the air, sharp and smug. "Told you she'd be here early? Girl's a creature of habit?" He was followed by two others. Both wore team hoodies and the kind of expressions boys get when no one's ever told them no. One of them cracked a Gatorade bottle open and took a sip like they were on break, not trespassing into the one place I still thought was mine. I reached for my duffel, trying to keep my movements slow, non-threatening. Maybe if I didn't make eye contact, they'd get bored and leave. But Mason stepped in front of me, blocking the path to the door. "Leaving so soon?" His grin was deliberate. "Callista says you're a bit too full of yourself lately. Thought we'd help you see your place." I didn't respond. I didn't look at him. That was a mistake. The taller boy to his left slammed his palm against the locker next to my head. I flinched so hard my shoulder knocked into the metal behind me. Mason leaned closer. "You don't belong here," he whispered, voice low, nearly bored. "And you sure as hell don't belong in her world." I looked up finally, and for a second, just one, I thought I saw something behind his expression. Uncertainty? No, just calculation. Then it happened fast. He grabbed my wrist, hard, not enough to snap bone, but enough to send a jolt of panic up my arm. I tried to yank away. He shoved me. My back hit the locker and the edge of the corner caught my face, just above my eye. The pain was immediate, blinding white, then heat. Something warm slid down my temple. I touched my face and saw red on my fingers. I didn't scream. I didn't even gasp. I just dropped to the floor, body folding in on itself as my legs gave out. My vision blurred with more than blood. They were laughing. The door slammed again as they fled through the back. Time stopped. Then it crawled. I didn't know how long I sat there. I didn't know if I was shaking because of the cold tiles or the fear still trapped in my body like static. My cheek throbbed in sync with my heartbeat. I couldn't even bring myself to cry. The next sound I heard was the squeak of sneakers, lighter this time, faster. Then a gasp. "Kate?" "Sarah." She dropped her gym bag, sprinting the last few feet, and knelt beside me. "What happened? Oh my God, your face!" She reached for her phone, but I touched her arm gently. "Paper towels," I whispered, voice hoarse. "Just, please." She didn't ask again. She ran to the sink, soaked a handful of paper towels, and pressed them gently to my face. The bleeding had slowed, but the cut burned like fire. Still, it was the heat behind my eyes, the kind that comes from betrayal, not pain, that hurt more. "Did someone do this to you?" she asked. I didn't answer. Because what was I supposed to say? Yes, Callista sent her boyfriend to remind me I was disposable? Yes, 3 boys stormed in like they owned the air I breathed. I just let her hold the towels to my eyebrow while I kept breathing. That was all I could do. Later that night, after the nurse had cleaned the wound and written a report, after I lied and told her I slipped on a bench, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling again. A knock at my door barely registered. Then it opened without permission. Callista stepped in like it was her room, like she hadn't detonated a bomb in my life less than 12 hours ago. She closed the door quietly and leaned against it. "I heard you were being dramatic again," she said, arms crossed. I turned my head just slightly. The bruising was already forming under the cut. My eye would swell by morning. "You're not going to ruin my senior year, got it?" Her voice was even, practiced. I didn't say anything. She tilted her head. "You think this is new? You think I don't know how this works? You run to someone, cry a little, and suddenly I'm the bad guy? Not happening. You won't take this from me." It was the first time I saw her clearly, not as a sister, as something colder, self-preserving. She left without waiting for a response, just turned and walked out. I stayed in bed, curled on my side, one hand clutching the hem of my blanket, not for comfort, just to feel something. The silence in that moment hurt more than the locker, because I knew then, she sent him. It hadn't been random. She wanted to make sure I stayed where I belonged, under her, invisible, useful when needed, silent when not. In the next morning, I pulled on a hoodie and sunglasses, even though the sky was overcast. I told Mom I had a migraine. She barely looked up from her tablet. At school, I kept my head down, but as I turned into the main hallway near the auditorium, I saw them. Mason leaning against the lockers like nothing touched him. Callista beside him, tossing her hair back as he whispered something in her ear. And they laughed. They laughed like nothing happened. And that was the day I stopped hoping anyone would save me. They laughed like nothing happened, and that was the day I stopped hoping anyone would save me. By second period, the ache in my cheek had settled into a throb I could tune out. The real pain, what pulsed deeper than bone, was knowing their laughter echoed louder than the truth. Still, when Sarah tugged me aside near the stairwell between classes, her voice urgent and whispering, I nodded. "We're going to the office," she said, "right now." Principal Coleman's office smelled like stale coffee and old laminate. His tie was crooked, and the way he leaned back in his chair as we entered reminded me of someone already preparing to dismiss whatever came next. Sarah started talking first. She was attacked, in the locker room, yesterday. He raised an eyebrow, then turned to me. "You were the one injured?" I nodded slowly, my mouth dry. "Do you know who it was?" I hesitated. Then I said the names clearly, though my voice barely carried. Mason Jex, and two others, Tyler and Ethan. He leaned forward just slightly at Mason's name. "Mason Jex, the quarterback?" I nodded again. He exhaled through his nose. "Are you sure you're not exaggerating what happened? Sometimes these things get misunderstood." My stomach twisted. There it was, the doubt. Not loud, but unmistakable. Polite disbelief dressed in administrative tone. "He slammed her into the lockers," Sarah snapped. "There's nothing misunderstood about that." He cleared his throat and picked up the phone. "Let me call in your sister." Sarah looked at me, jaw clenched. 2 minutes later, Callista floated in like she'd just stepped off a pageant stage. Hair perfect, sweater coordinated, smile ready. "Principal Coleman," she said sweetly, "is something wrong?" He gestured to the seat beside me. "We've had an accusation regarding Mason Jex." Her eyes widened, lips parting in well-rehearsed shock. "Mason? What? That's insane. He was with me after practice yesterday." Then she turned to me, tilting her head. "Are you okay, Odie? You must have hit your head worse than I thought." I looked down at my hands because if I looked at her face too long, I was afraid I might finally scream. Coleman glanced between us, then made a small mark in his notepad. "I'll follow up with the boys. For now, Kate, please return to class." "Sarah, thank you." We stepped out into the hall. Sarah looked like she wanted to punch a wall. "She's lying," she said. "I know." "And he's going to let it go. I saw it in his face." "I know," I whispered again. We didn't speak as we walked toward the gym. I peeled off into the locker room, not to change, just to breathe. Later that day, Coach Harvin was called in. I knew because I passed him near the faculty lounge, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. He was the one who always said, "We're a team in this school, no one left behind." But when Coleman asked him about seeing Mason in the hallway near the girls' locker room, his response was short and spineless. "I didn't see much, just some kids. I don't want to accuse the wrong person." Of course not. That might put a dent in Friday night's game plan. That night at dinner, I didn't say a word. I pushed chicken and rice around my plate until it looked like I'd eaten something. Then Mom brought it up, like she was discussing a faulty dishwasher. Principal Coleman called. He said, "You're accusing Mason of something pretty serious." Dad didn't even look up from his plate. Mom sighed. "The school said there's no proof. Maybe you just misunderstood what happened?" I clenched my fork. "Callista said Mason left early. She didn't even know you were still in the building." I looked at her then. Really looked. "And that makes sense to you?" I asked softly. Dad set down his knife with a clink. "We don't want to jeopardize Callista's future over a misunderstanding. Let's not escalate things." Callista's future, not my injury, not the bruises forming like slow thunder under my skin. I stood up without a word, carried my plate to the sink, and walked upstairs. I closed my bedroom door quietly and pulled out my notebook, the one with half-filled pages of things I never said out loud. I didn't write much that night, just one line. Maybe I am invisible. Maybe they want me that way. The next morning, I stared at my computer screen for a long time. I'd written an email to the school board the night before. Detailed everything. Attached a photo Sarah had taken of my bruised face before the swelling went down. My finger hovered over send, and then I deleted it. Instead, I opened a blank document and typed a new sentence. This is what happened to me. It sat there on the screen, blinking back at me. I didn't know who'd believe me, but I knew silence wasn't safety anymore. That thought stayed with me the next morning as I stood at my locker, staring blankly at the scuffed textbooks I hadn't touched in 2 days. I hadn't told Sarah about the unsent email, hadn't told anyone. But that sentence, "This is what happened to me," felt like a match just waiting for the right surface to strike. During third period, I asked to go to the library. I told the teacher I needed to exchange a book for an essay. She nodded, distracted, barely looking up. So I walked the long hallway alone, my bruised rib pulsing with each breath. Inside the library, it was hushed as always. Miss Garner, the librarian, gave me a nod. I didn't plan to stay long, just pick a book, pretend to flip through it, and maybe breathe in a place that didn't reek of fear or fake sympathy. I was in the nonfiction aisle near the back when I heard them. 2 boys, laughing low and fast behind the tall stacks, their voices sharp-edged like they knew they shouldn't be talking so loud. "You're lucky Mason didn't get caught," one said. "He's a dumbass doing that near the hallway cam." I froze. My fingers still rested on the spine of a thick book about wildlife photography. "Seriously," the other boy snorted. "Dude could have just waited till after school, but no, he had to be a show-off, in front of a freaking camera?" I didn't breathe. The hallway camera. I knew the one they meant. It was right outside the girls' locker room, mounted just above the side exit where they'd fled. I'd walked under it hundreds of times, never thinking twice. Now my heart kicked against my ribs. I waited till they left, their voices fading toward the checkout desk, before I slowly stepped out from the row. I returned the book, nodded at Miss Garner, and walked, calmly, I hoped, back to class. But inside me, everything buzzed. Later that night, after dinner was picked at but not finished, and Callista had gone out, some study group at Mason's place, of course, I opened the old wooden drawer of my desk and began looking for a USB drive to save my testimony draft. I found a small red one with peeling edges. The label read, 6th grade graduation. Curious, I plugged it into my laptop. A single photo popped up. It was Callista in her white dress, hair curled, smile camera ready. I was in the background, no surprise there, half cut out by someone's shoulder. Just a sliver of me, my hair, and my unsure expression. But that's not what stopped me. It was Callista's face. She wasn't just smiling for the camera, she was smiling through it. And her eyes weren't searching for me or anyone. They were locked on the lens with something cold, almost calculating, like she knew this image would be printed, framed, and hung in the hallway. She owned that space, then and now. I sat back in my chair, the photo still open. All this time, I had thought the joke at the assembly was just that, a cruel attempt at humor. But it wasn't a joke. It was a confession, years in the making. "That's how she's always seen me," I murmured. Not a sister, not a threat, just an afterthought. I printed the photo and slipped it into the front pocket of my backpack. Then I opened my email again. This time, I didn't draft another complaint to the school board. Instead, I opened a new message addressed to the district's IT manager, Mr. Landry. Subject: Request for camera review. Body: Dear Mr. Landry, I believe an incident involving personal safety was captured on the hallway camera outside the girls' locker room last Tuesday. I'm requesting access or confirmation of the footage's existence. Thank you for your time and discretion. I stared at the message for a full minute, then I saved it as a draft. That night, I lay in bed with the printed photo under my pillow. For once, I didn't feel hunted. I felt like the hunter. My pulse was calm, my thoughts sharp. I wasn't thinking about justice anymore, not right away. I was thinking about patterns, evidence, timing. The more they acted like I didn't matter, the more clearly I saw them. I whispered to the dark, if I disappear, it'll be on my terms. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number, no name, no preview. I opened the message. It read, "You're not the only one." I didn't recognize the number, but what they sent me changed everything. The message came at 1:17 a.m. I was still awake, lying flat on my back in the dark, replaying the image of that hallway camera in my mind. My phone buzzed once on the nightstand. Just one notification, no contact name. There was a video attached. I sat up slowly, the hush of the house amplifying every sound, the rustle of my blanket, the soft creak of the floorboards beneath my mattress. I pressed play, holding my breath. It was shaky and grainy, like it had been filmed in secret. Mason's voice was unmistakable, even under the crackle of parking lot wind and low laughter. "She cried, man," he said, grinning as he leaned against someone's car. "One shove. That's all it took. Freaking blur." The clip cut off abruptly. I didn't move for a full minute. I was sure the silence in the house would shatter if I did. Another message followed. "I'm sorry. I should have sent this sooner. I didn't know what to do." It was signed, Rosen. That name pulled at something buried. Rosen Chavez, my friend in 6th and 7th grade. She'd drifted toward Callista's circle not long after, then disappeared from my life the way I had disappeared from most photos. A third message came moments later. "I have the original file. If you want it, I'll meet you behind Ridgewood Cafe at lunch." The next day, I skipped class and walked the long route behind the coffee shop across from school. Rosen was already there, standing under the awning, shifting her weight from foot to foot. She looked different, tired, older than I remembered, but familiar in the way her hands still fidgeted with her sleeves. She didn't speak right away, just held out the USB. "I shouldn't have ignored it when it happened," she said quietly, "but I couldn't sleep after that joke at the assembly. I know what he did, and I know she knew." I nodded slowly and took the drive from her hand. "Why now?" She looked down. "Because you were bleeding, and nobody said anything." Then she turned and walked away. 2 days passed. I didn't tell anyone about the file. I kept it tucked into the back of my drawer under an old SAT prep book. I didn't need to see it again. I'd heard enough in that one clip, but then the envelope arrived. It was just after 5 p.m. on Thursday. I was home alone. Callista had a club meeting, and my parents were at a local fundraiser. I checked the mailbox like I always did, more out of habit than interest. Inside was a single manila envelope, no return address, just my family's name and our street, printed in generic block letters. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was one thing, a printed photo. It was me. Lying on the locker room floor, blood trailing from my temple, my eyes half open, unfocused. The camera angle was unfamiliar, slightly high, almost as if from the gym's security feed. Underneath the photo was a typed line, "Still think silence protects you?" I stood frozen on the porch, heart hammering, air too tight in my chest. But then, like someone flicked a switch, everything inside me quieted. Someone saw me, Someone believed me, and maybe someone else was just as tired of staying quiet. That night, while reheating leftover spaghetti, my mother poked her head into the kitchen. "Sweetie, how about a haircut this weekend? Just us girls?" Her tone was gentle, even lighthearted. She rarely asked to do things with me alone. I blinked. "Sure, okay." For a moment, something in me softened. She came in, opened a bottle of water, leaned against the counter like she used to before life started tilting toward Callista. "I just think a fresh look would help, and with everything going on." She paused, then added carefully, "Let's just keep things light for now, okay? It's Callista's scholarship interview week. She's under a lot of pressure." The warmth inside me evaporated. I nodded once. "Of course." We didn't speak for the rest of dinner. Later that night, I sat in front of the mirror with the USB in my hand. My reflection stared back, bruised but composed, quiet but not silent. I whispered to my own eyes, I was always afraid that telling the truth would break the family, but maybe it was already broken, and I'm just finally looking. I turned back to my laptop. I plugged in the USB, copied the video onto a hidden folder, opened a new Word document and wrote one sentence. "I'm not doing this to ruin you, Callista. I'm doing this to stop becoming less than I am." The cursor blinked under the words, like it was waiting for permission. I opened the school board's official incident submission page. My finger hovered over the Upload Evidence button. The screen glowed softly, illuminating my hand. Then my phone buzzed again. One message. "She's coming for you next." The message didn't scare me. It confirmed I'd waited long enough. I didn't reply. I didn't ask who sent it. I just set my phone down, opened my laptop, and stared at the video thumbnail one more time. Mason's face half lit by the parking lot lights, frozen mid-smirk, like the punchline to a joke no one should have laughed at. The next morning, I was in the school restroom between second and third period. My backpack sat on the tiled floor, open beside me, while I scrolled through notifications. My thumb hesitated when I saw the post. Mason, smiling. The caption read, "Some people bleed easy. Guess we all have our talents." Underneath it, one reaction stood out. Callista. So. Not only did she like it, she commented, "Bless her fragile little heart." My stomach didn't drop. My eyes didn't well. Instead, a strange quiet settled over me, like a fog lifting. I screenshot the post, locked my phone, and stood still for a full minute inside that pale blue stall. Then I walked out, dried my hands, and went to the library. During lunch, I printed out the post, slipped the paper into my folder, and walked back to my locker. The hallway was half empty, some kids still finishing their meals, others gathered in small knots of conversation near the vending machines. I opened my locker and taped the printout to the inside wall, not to hide it, to remember. If I needed a reason not to back down, I murmured under my breath, this is it. Later that day, I was cutting through the gym corridor on my way to history when I saw something that stopped me cold. Tallis Garver, a freshman with a soft voice and even softer steps, was pinned near the trophy case by Ethan, Mason's friend, the one who stood there the day I hit the floor and did nothing. Tallis's backpack strap was clenched in Ethan's fist. She was silent, lips trembling. I didn't think, I just moved. I walked right up to them, placed my body between them, and said clearly, "Back off. Now." Ethan looked down at me, smug. "Oh, come on. We're just talking." "You heard me," I said, not louder, but firmer. He held my stare a second too long, like he couldn't quite believe I was still standing. But he backed off. Tallis let out a breath she'd clearly been holding and stepped behind me. Ethan shrugged like he didn't care, then turned and walked away, whistling like a cartoon villain. Across the hall, I saw Coach Harvin watching. He didn't say a word, but I walked over to him anyway. "You saw that?" I asked quietly. He shifted, awkward. "Yeah." I nodded once. "How long do you think silence keeps your job safe?" His jaw moved, but he didn't answer. Just looked away, like the floor had something worth studying. After that, I walked Tallis to class. She didn't speak, but her hand brushed mine at the doorway. That afternoon, I found a note folded in my locker. No name, just 4 words scrawled on lined paper. You saved me. Don't stop. I read it 3 times before slipping it into my pocket. Back home, in the quiet of my bedroom, I sat cross-legged on the floor and unfolded the note again. I thought my voice was small, I whispered. Turns out it just hadn't hit the right wall yet. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was chasing something. I felt like I was building it. That evening, while I was helping load dishes into the washer, my phone buzzed. A new email. I dried my hands on a towel and opened it. Subject: Scheduled testimony opportunity. Body: You've been granted 10 minutes to present a statement and supporting materials at the school board meeting this Friday, 4:30 p.m. in room 206. My heart didn't pound. It just steadied, like I'd stepped onto firm ground after drifting too long. I folded the message into my palm like it was something sacred. Okay, I said softly. Let's begin. I didn't need them to believe me anymore. I needed them to hear me. The board meeting was set for late afternoon, the kind of hour when shadows stretch long across tiled floors and even fluorescent lights feel colder. I arrived 10 minutes early, as instructed. Alone. Just me, the USB in my palm, and everything I had left. The room was rectangular, long table at the center, folding chairs arranged around it like props in a play, bottles of water sweating onto cheap coasters, a whiteboard no one had touched. At the far end sat Callista, flanked by our parents, my mother in pearls, my father with his blazer too tight at the shoulders, both nodding like diplomats on a goodwill tour, and next to them, Mason. Hair slicked back, blazer too, like they were there for a scholarship photo op. I didn't greet anyone, didn't even glance their way. I took the empty seat across the table and slid the USB onto the polished wood like it might scorch the surface. The lead board member, Ms. Evelyn Calder, adjusted her reading glasses and folded her hands. Kate, you have 10 minutes. I stood. My voice didn't shake. This is what I lived. You decide if it deserves silence. I inserted the USB and tapped the spacebar. The projector screen flickered once, then came alive. The footage played. There was no music, no narration, just the raw sound of gym hallway buzz, sneakers squeaking, and laughter, followed by the shove, the clang of metal, my body striking the locker's edge. My hands instinctively touched the phantom line above my brow. The video ended with Mason and his friends disappearing down the back exit. The room held its breath. Callista was the first to break the silence. Her voice was soft, measured. This is awful. I didn't know. I would have stopped him. I looked at her, not through her, not past her, at her. Mason let out a quiet scoff, shifting in his seat. We were messing around. People get so sensitive. Someone near me exhaled audibly, not out of sympathy, out of disgust. That's when Ms. Calder lifted another sheet of paper. This photo was submitted anonymously, she said, holding it up for everyone to see. It's dated 5 years ago. The photo was familiar. I recognized it from that USB I'd found earlier at home, Callista at my 6th grade graduation, me half cut from the frame. Ms. Calder's voice cut the silence again. This isn't new behavior, is it? Callista's mouth opened. Nothing came out. My mother looked down at the table. My father cleared his throat like it might buy him more air. Then came the statements. First Sarah's. One line read aloud. She was bleeding and I panicked, but she didn't cry. She asked for paper towels. Then Rosen's. I gave her the video because I couldn't watch someone lie their way out of the truth anymore. And finally, Coach Harvin. His note was typed. Plain font, simple words. I didn't speak because I was scared of losing my job. That's not an excuse. The room went still again. Ms. Calder looked at the board members, then at the table in front of her. We've reached a decision. Mason Jex. Suspended for 30 school days. Immediate removal from all team captainships and athletic privileges for the remainder of the academic year. Callista Rain. Academic probation pending investigation into collusion and intimidation of witnesses. The board announced the initiation of a student-led anti-bullying reform committee. Optional participation, though heavily encouraged, for both students and staff. No one clapped, not because it wasn't deserved, but because something heavier had settled over the room, an understanding. I didn't stay for what came next. I stood, slid the USB back into my coat pocket, and walked out. Not because I was embarrassed, not out of pride either. I was just finished. This wasn't revenge. This was release. I passed the front office and rounded the corner of the administration wing. The sun had dipped just low enough to cast amber across the sidewalk. That's when Mason stepped out from behind the side wall. His expression wasn't angry. It was practiced, almost smug, like someone holding onto a story they thought still mattered. "This isn't over," he said, voice low, teeth bared. I didn't pause. I met his stare. "You're right," I said quietly. "It's just finally begun." I turned before he could answer, letting the silence be my punctuation. I didn't wait for his reaction. I had a voice now, and I knew exactly where to use it. The community forum was being held in the high school auditorium, the one with the squeaky red velvet seats and dusty stage lights that only flickered properly if you kicked the base of the switchboard. But tonight, they were all lit. Every row was filled. Parents, students, teachers, a few familiar faces from the board, and even a couple of reporters I recognized from the local paper. I sat in the third row. My hands were calm, rested on my lap. The USB was tucked into my pocket, but I wouldn't need it this time. A school staffer stepped up to the podium and scanned the sheet of paper in her hand. "Our next speaker is Kate Brown, senior student." The murmur in the crowd faded. You could hear the air shift. I stood. My legs held steady, though the walk to the mic felt longer than I remembered. Every footstep down the aisle echoed, not because of the acoustics, but because for the first time, people were paying attention. I reached the podium, adjusted the mic once, then spoke into it. They called me a blur. I believed it. Until I bled. The words hung in the air. I let them. My name is Kate Brown, and what happened to me in that locker room wasn't just an incident. It was the tip of a much larger wound, a wound so quiet, most of you didn't even know it existed. I've been erased in 1,000 small ways. Hand-me-down praise, split birthdays, forgotten rides, and always, always being the one who had to understand. I glanced at the front row. My mother had her lips tight, hands clutched around her handbag. My father sat beside her like he'd swallowed a nail. Callista wasn't here. "You want to know how bullies survive?" I continued. "They count on people staying silent, on adults turning away, on peers pretending they didn't see, and most of all, on girls like me believing they deserve it." A slight stir rippled across the crowd. "But I don't anymore." Just as I caught my breath to continue, the tech assistant in the booth flipped through slides, preloaded visual aids I'd sent in earlier. Then it happened. Without warning, one photo blinked onto the screen behind me. The 6th grade graduation picture. Callista beaming front and center, hair perfect, posture proud. Me, half out of the frame, blocked by someone's shoulder. A blur, a shadow, nothing more. The audience didn't gasp. They didn't need to. I turned, faced the image. "That girl deserved more," I said softly, then turned back to the room. "So do all of us." The silence that followed didn't feel like absence. It felt like attention. I closed with one sentence. "This isn't just about my story. It's about everyone you've ever let disappear." The applause started slow, not loud, not forced, but it spread, sincere. I walked off stage, not needing to look at anyone. I didn't need their faces. I already knew what mine looked like now. In the hallway outside the auditorium, the cold, fluorescent lights returned. The quiet did too. Callista passed by me near the vending machines. No makeup, hair pulled back. Her shoulders were curled slightly forward, like even her spine was tired of pretending. She didn't say a word, didn't meet my eyes. I didn't stop. Word had already spread. Mason was withdrawing from the district. That was the word they used. Polished. Sanitized. Everyone knew it meant he got pulled out before the school board issued anything worse. I kept walking. An older woman near the side exit touched my arm gently. Her cardigan smelled like cloves and clean laundry. "You spoke for my granddaughter," she said. "She couldn't be here tonight, but she's like you." I paused. That was the first time all evening I felt breathless. "I was like her too," I said, "but not anymore." Later, after the building had mostly emptied and the night settled back into its usual hush, I stepped outside. The autumn air cut across my skin, crisp and bracing. Leaves chased each other down the sidewalk like they had somewhere to be. I pulled out my phone. One new message from a name I'd grown to look for. Tallis. Her message was just a sentence. "Thank you for standing up. Someday I will too." I didn't type anything back right away. Some words don't need a reply. They just need to land. And maybe that's what power really is. Not being loud, just being unafraid. Monday morning came like any other, except now the halls didn't echo with the same weight. Mason was gone. No notice, no apology, just gone. His name didn't appear on the attendance sheet, and someone said his locker had been cleaned out over the weekend. Some said his family transferred him to a school 2 counties over. Others whispered he'd been sent to live with an uncle out of state. I didn't ask. Callista, on the other hand, was still around. Her steps were quieter now. The usual swirl of girls didn't follow her from class to class. Even her laugh had disappeared. That Monday, I saw her by the cafeteria entrance. She paused for a beat, looked directly at me. Not a glare, not a smirk, just a glance that held something hollow behind it. And then she looked away. There were no words left between us. Maybe there never were. Classes returned to a rhythm. My chair still sat at the back row in history. My lab partner still did most of the talking in chemistry. I still didn't sit at any particular lunch table. But something had shifted. I wasn't invisible anymore. The freshmen who used to walk past without noticing started giving me small nods in the hallway. I'd see them watching, curious, cautious, but not afraid. A few even smiled. And at the end of Thursday's English class, Mrs. Harrows pulled me aside. "We're holding a student-led workshop next month," she said, pulling a flyer from her desk drawer. "About voice, identity, pushing through adversity. I think your perspective would mean something." I took the flyer with 2 fingers. The paper was heavy, printed with intention. I nodded once. Later that night, at home, I found a folded piece of paper on my desk. Not in an envelope, just left neatly on top of my laptop. My mom's handwriting, slanted, careful. "We didn't protect you. We're trying to learn how." I didn't crumple it. I didn't respond. I just tucked it under my journal. Some things didn't need an answer, but they needed to be kept. By the end of the week, the Community Youth Gallery opened its autumn showcase. I submitted a series I titled Blur No More. I'd curated it carefully, not just with the camera, but with memory. One photo showed 2 girls in graduation gowns, Callista in full focus, front and center. Me, cropped at the side, head slightly bowed. My name tag barely visible. The next few images explored shadows, reflections, moments caught mid-motion. But the final image stood by itself at the end of the wall. It was me. Taken last week. I'd set the timer, framed the shot carefully. I was standing in soft light, camera in hand, facing the lens. Centered, not defiant, not overdone, just there. It was the frame I chose. A group of visitors moved through the gallery space behind me. Some whispered. A few took photos of the photos. I stood nearby, letting them pass. Then Tallis appeared beside me. She looked up at the final piece, took a long breath, like she'd been holding something all week. "You still don't talk much," she said quietly. I smiled. "I don't need to anymore. I said what mattered." She nodded, and we both stood there shoulder to shoulder, letting the moment settle in. The hum of voices faded as I thought back, not to the locker room or the hallway, or even the board meeting. I thought about the photo from 6th grade, the one where I'd been nothing more than a blur, someone else's background, and yet, here I was. Callista once called me a background blur, but I didn't fade. I focused.